Hello there! I am continuing on with my art tour series. This should be the last, or at least the second to the last video of my art tour. If you're curious on seeing the previous parts, I'll leave a link in the description or a little card in the corner so you can look at that later on if you like. Now this video is going to be going over all the work I did during my fabric design classes while I was in college. So as an art major, I took fabric design around 6 times, and those classes span from 2012 to 2016. So we're just gonna go over all of that artwork I made in those 4 years. Now out of those 6 classes that I took, 3 of them were intro classes, and then 4 of them I took advanced fabric art 4 times. I'm gonna go over the intro classes first. We're gonna start off with the first class I ever took, which was fiber art. Let's just get right into it. Just gonna zoom out a bit. Now I know fabric design, fabric art, textiles, what have you, doesn't really have much of a presence on YouTube, so I'll try to explain the techniques and things that I do in these projects as best as I can. So this thing right here is a quilt. It is an art quilt, so wouldn't be very useful as a quilt on your bed. It's a bit small for that, and it's about like 4 feet by 2 feet. Wouldn't be very warm or comfy either, so it's essentially just to hang on a wall, and look pretty. But to be quite honest, I don't even think it does that part very well either. So this is 2 layers of hand-dyed fabric with quilt batting in the middle. This disembodied head and these disembodied hands are mine. They're also painted with acrylic paint on a separate piece of fabric, and then I glued that piece of fabric onto here. And my mouth's sewn shut. We'll get a close-up on that in a little bit. And then here I got some blood represented by red fabric dripping down here. If you've seen any of my previous art tour videos, you'd know there's a lot of blood in my artwork. Might have a bit of a problem. Just a little problem. Nah, I'm just kidding. Never enough blood everywhere. At the very bottom here, we got this patchwork fabric. Doesn't mean anything. Just a desperate attempt to fill the requirements for this project. So yeah, don't worry about that. Doesn't mean anything. Back up here. Let's zoom back in. Oh, spoopy. So as you can see, mouth is sewn shut. I did that with sewing machine stitching. Words escape me. And right here, I don't think you can notice, maybe not, but I put a real sewing needle in there. Because past me thought I was so clever. I was like, ooh, look at this. I'm gonna put a real needle in there so future me can stab herself with it later on. Thank you, past me. You're a pal. I actually think I have stabbed myself with this. At one point. But yeah, it's there. And I have this string hanging down because why not? Now I think what I was going for with this one is that I have social anxiety, so I end up saying stupid shit sometimes because I have the conversation skills of a snail. And then I embarrass myself, so I'm all like, well, I'll just take that anger and frustration out on this artwork and I'll just sew my mouth shut because, you know, that's how you solve your problems. You don't learn how to talk to people better. No, you just sew your mouth shut and never speak again. Because that's not edgy or anything. Nope, not at all. So say goodbye to this masterpiece. We're gonna move on. And now we're gonna go over this atrocity. I'll try to explain what this is as best I can. It is a digital print on fabric. So to do something like this, you can either set your fabric with a solution or not. You can do either or. And you would put it on a support, so you would glue it onto some paper or something like that. And ideally, you can stick it in any inkjet printer, ideally, and shove it in there. Then, if it works, you'll get a print on fabric. Sounds so easy. It's not. Not at all. If the printer doesn't like the fabric, then it's just gonna eat it. And don't get water on this until the ink's all set, because if you do, you'll get watermarks all over your image and your ink will just spread all over the place. Not like I know from personal experience or anything. Not like I had to do this like 3 different times because it either got eaten or I got water on it. No. Of course not. It's also supposed to be black and white, but it turned green on me. I hate this project. Anyway, let's get a close-up on it. So the second part of this project was embroidery. So it was digital print with embroidery on top of it. So I got some hand stitching here, some beads, and chain stitching around the hands, and I got real chains there. And I got this nonsense, whatever the hell that is, but that's on there too. It's probably my least favorite project I've ever done in all of the fabric art classes I've taken. There's only maybe one more that I hate about as much as this one. So yeah, say goodbye to this atrocity. Moving on. So I got this heart here. Probably wondering what this has to do with fabric. Well, it has a lot to do with fabric. It's actually the only surviving part of a piece I did back in fiber art. It was a wearable art. It was a dress, to be more specific. And this was a little prop that went along with it. It is made out of newspaper and masking tape. So can we see the newspaper in here? Let me see. Give me a second. Can we see inside that? No. Well, there's newspaper. You can see the newspaper inside there if the lighting was right. Oh, see that light stuff in there? That's newspaper. So, newspaper, masking tape. I gessoed it, and then I painted over it with acrylics. So it's a nice paper heart. This is a prop for a dress that no longer exists. But don't worry, I have pictures of it. And I'll go over that right now. So this is the dress that no longer exists. I tore it apart and cannibalized all the fabric and used it for something else. Hooray! So this is the first dress I've ever made. I didn't use a pattern for this. This is before I took any of my costume construction classes in college, so didn't really know how to make a garment from scratch, so I used a store-bought dress, and I built off of that. So there really is an actual dress underneath all this nonsense. Just can't see it anymore. I made this dress for a show we had to do in this class. I ended up doing the show again voluntarily. Again, 2 more times, so I did the show 3 years in a row. So that was fun. Quite like that. And here's a better picture that you can see. The whole inspiration for this dress was fleshy bits, organs, and entrails, and blood. Gotta put that blood in there. So it's all gross and gory inspirations for this. There's these things coming off the tail of the dress. These blobby shapes. They're supposed to be entrails. I sewed together a tube of fabric and stuffed it with stuffing. And then sewed each section shut to make it look like organs. Not sure if it's that successful. There's also some plastic masks throughout the piece. The other picture that we saw earlier had a mask in the front I didn't bother putting the mask in the front for this picture because whatever. And then all of the fabric I hand dyed myself. There's like 3 different types of fabric in here. I think there's cotton, no, rayon, silk, and muslin, and cotton. There's cotton in here too, yeah. So yeah, first dress ever made. It's alright. Well, it was alright. It no longer exists. So we're just gonna move on to the next item on the list. I hope you enjoyed that dress. I'm sure it was glorious. Anyway, we got another quilt. Yes, quilts are back. This one is 7 layers of fabric. I think I used 3 different types of fabric. The top and the backing fabric are rayon. And then I have cotton fabric in the center. Then I have this, let's see, this see-through silk organza in the center. So I'll try to explain this as best as I can. Let me just zoom in. So this mess of a face is painted with acrylic. It's painted really badly with acrylic. You can barely tell what's going on here. Then I have eyelashes in here that were machine sewn, and they look terrible. Then for the hair up here, I did a quilting technique where I do the top stitching and then I cut into the top fabric so you can see the fabrics that are underneath it. Then I did the same thing down here. This is supposed to be smoke here. Well, supposed to represent smoke at the very least, but it certainly doesn't look like it. Let me zoom out a little bit. Yeah, it's supposed to look like there's smoke coming out of her mouth. But yeah, it don't work very well. And it was supposed to be double-sided, but I never finished this side, clearly. I just cut out the back fabric so you can see through the whole quilt. So, never finished this particular one. Just fine because the back fabric was just garbage anyway. It wasn't even salvageable. That's it for this one. This was the final project for my fiber artwork. Remember this one because it's gonna come back later on and it's gonna look a lot better. I assure you. So remember this guy. It's gonna come back. So this is the end of fiber art. I'm gonna move on to the next class that I took. So the next class is surface art. Now with the previous class, which was fiber art, that was all about quilting techniques, making wearable art, and constructing 3D forms. It's very heavy on sewing and using a sewing machine. This class was all about, well, the surface of the fabric, and it's more along the lines of 2D imagery. They're done with painting or with silkscreen printing. This one right here is a painting on loose, unprimed canvas. It was all done with some transparent textile inks. And not much to say about this one. It's just a beach. Yes, it is a beach scene. I assure you. We got the beach, the ocean, and this is supposed to be a setting sun. Obviously it's stylized. So yeah, it's the first project I did with surface art. Not all that spectacular. Let's move on. I hit the mic. Very sorry. So this next one is a quilt. Yes. Back to the quilts already. How nice. So it's 2, 3 pieces of fabric this time around. And the top fabric has some quilting techniques in here, but it also has some silk screen printing to make these images up here and down below. Don't mind this. You don't want to see what's underneath that. It's horrifying. I promise. Not missing much. So these prints were done with silkscreen. I don't know what that is. It's just a wooden frame with... Is it the silk or is it like nylon? It's a type of fabric that's stretched really tightly over the wood frame and has these little microscopic dots in rows throughout the fabric. And you just place it on your paper or your fabric, put the ink that you want to use on it, then use a little squeegee, make a couple passes, and then you got an image. For these images here, I used a photo. I used multiple photos that I took myself for these. So it's a quilt, silkscreen images, hand-dyed fabric. And let's just move this up a little bit so you can see the other colors I got in here. You see some of the quilting I did. I used that silk organza again, you can see through. So I cut away the top fabric again. Then you have all these other images down here that I printed that are smaller than the ones up here. Here you can see the back fabric showing through. And then here I just have these images hanging from yarn that's tied to my hand up there. Don't particularly care for this part of it. Honestly, I don't really like this quilt at all, but I especially don't like this. I think the yarn looks really tacky, and so do the little cutouts. I don't like them either. So yeah, not much more to say about this one, except that it gives me a very strong feeling of meh. Like some of the artwork that I've done with fabric art, some of it makes me cringe, and some of it just fills me with eh. And some of it's really nice. This isn't one of the nice ones. Let's move on. So we got another quilt. Now I really like this one still, surprisingly enough. It doesn't fill me with strong feelings of meh. I actually like this. Now unlike the other quilts, the quilting on this is more supplemental. This one is more focused on the actual surface of the fabric, and all the quilting done is just secondary. So I'll just zoom in a little bit. Since I like this one, we'll zoom in. So I just have a photo I took of myself, printed it on here with silk screening. This texture you see right here, I actually scanned some crumbled up tin foil, and then I used that as a print to get this texture in here. So this texture is on my body, and it's all throughout the rest of the quilt. So it's on this side, it's also all throughout the rest of it. And these little guys right here are a photo collage and a photo manipulation all thrown into one. Let me zoom out a little bit. So I have these things coming out of my back. And let's move this down to see the rest. So it's coming out of my back, and then they just have this repeating pattern going throughout the bottom of the quilt and then a little bit up top. And you can see how the texture that I made with the crumbled up aluminum foil all throughout the rest of it. And then the very slight quilting I have in here. Again, I cut the top layer of fabric out to see the fabric below. Then I did some embroidery stitching in here. So I just stitched the cuts back. I stitched the cuts in the fabric closed, semi-closed. Words escape me, I'm sorry. So yeah, I still like this one quite a bit. I think it's one of the more successful pieces I did in my intro classes at the very least. So yeah, not bad. Let's move on. So we got another quilt. I seem to have had a thing for quilts back in the day. So this quilt is 2 layers of fabric, so nothing too crazy. And then a whole bunch of prints that were either printed directly on the top fabric or they were printed on separate fabric and then pasted onto this fabric. So I got a whole bunch going on here. I got a whole bunch of prints. I have some embroidery, some beading, and some quilting. Let's just zoom in on this. So we got a print. We got some spoopy hands up here. Very spoopy. And some spoopy little figurines up there at the top. Here we got the quilting. So we got the red top fabric and the green fabric. Then we have printed words on top of that fabric. And then down here we got some spoopy toy prints. Very spoopy. Got little dolls, little stuffed animals, all that fun stuff. And I believe this one was the final project I did for surface art. So that'll be the end of surface art, and then we'll move on to the next class. Hooray! Alright, moving on to fabric dye. So that's dyeing fabric, not dye as in dead. So this whole class was, well, about using dye and dyeing fabric, as the name suggests. This one is a silk painting, so it's, well, silk, and then I painted on it with dye. And I used some resists in here to make sure that some areas stayed white. The resist I used was glue, the blue Elmer's glue I believe I used for this. You can also use a cold water wax as a resist on silk painting as well. I don't think I used that. I think it was just the glue for this one. So we got these eyes here. Oh, got these 2 figures in the center. Then here's the bottom, all cut out. And then we got green blood dripping down this time instead of red. I got really creative for this one, yeah. So I don't really like this piece. Mainly because it looks like a weird cow face. It's a bit strange. So you got like this weird nose and then the eyes. And you got this little mane going around it. It's strange. I didn't intend for that at all, but it happened. But I do like how I cut it out at the top here. I kind of like this design at the top. Other than that, don't particularly care for this one. Moving on. So this right here is the second garment I ever made. I didn't use a pattern for this one, nor did I use an existing dress, so I kind of just winged this one based on guesstimations of my measurements. I didn't draft a pattern, I just kind of vaguely made this thing as best as I could. Still didn't know how to actually properly construct outfits from patterns, so I winged it. Everything here is hand dyed. I'm getting a close-up on the shibori dyeing I did. This shibori technique is called wood grain. So you hand stitch your fabric. In this case I had a hand stitch like 3 yards of fabric and then dye it, and the hand stitching acts as a resist, and that's how you get this pattern you see here. Now, most of the fabric in this dress I believe is rayon. This centerpiece that we're seeing right now that's black, That is silk, and I hand dyed that as well, I believe. I dyed that with acid dyes, and I just did just a straight dye, so nothing fancy here. And then I cut out the silk to make that shape tail thing that we saw. And here's the front of the dress. There's more hand dyeing on the front. I get this little V pattern, and then I have it straight across at the top. So I wanted to use warm colors for this one. It's supposed to be inspired by fire and phoenixes. And I have this feather shape cut out down here at the bottom of the dress. You can see some of that fraying I did by hand. Then we have these little strips of fabric at the sides that are cotton organza, I think. They're see-through, that's all that really matters. So yes, all about the burbs. The fiery burbs in this case. So I have some feathers on here. I have that cut out shape as a feather at the front of the dress. Now here's a picture of the front of the dress. As you can see, there used to be feathers at the top of the dress, but those are no longer on the dress because they all kind of fell off. So yeah, don't worry about that. And then here's a picture of the back of the dress. You can see some more feathers that I have here that are still there, as we noticed earlier from the recording. I had some, what are they called? Peacock feathers on here. And then just some strips of fabric. And then you can see the tail of the dress a little bit better here. And here are the sleeves that I made for this dress. These also don't exist anymore. I tore these apart and used the fabric for something else. I like the dyeing on these. I used some really nice colors. The fabric's really nice, which is why I tore them apart. Haha! So, we'll just move right along to the next thing that I have to show. So I hope you enjoyed that other dress I showed you. That was a little bit better than the last one we looked at. And now it's time to go over this atrocity right here. So this is the final project did for dye. It's 3 layers of fabric. It's supposed to be a quilt, but oh gosh. So the individual fabric pieces for this quilt are very nice. I worked hard on them. Unfortunately, they don't work very well together. So we'll just talk about the top fabric real quick. This is a black fabric, and I used either Thiox or bleach to discharge the black color in the fabric. Thiox is essentially bleach, it's just different chemical composition, but it does a similar thing. The Thiox would be the more purplish tones you see here. So I have a photo print here, and then this texture around here that's actually done with bubble wrap. Then over here, this crackle texture I used a paste called potato dextrin. You have to cook the paste, you brush it on your fabric, it dries and cracks, and then you could just take a sponge and just dab either the dye, the paint, or in this case, a gel bleach into the cracks, and it gives you this pattern. It's very nice. I quite like it. I always love doing that stuff. I did it a lot in fabric class. We're going to go over the back fabric next, which I really like quite a bit. There's no imagery on here, it's just all layers of dye. So the first layer of dye that I did was the blue and the red, and I used it's called shibori. It's basically a resist form of dyeing fabric, and I bunched up some fabric like this, and then I took some string and wrapped it around the fabric really tightly, and that'll give you like a spider web motif almost on your fabric. Can't really see it on this one because there's so many layers, So I did that layer first with the color, and then I did that spiderweb resisting again, and instead of using dye this time I used bleach, so I bleached out some of the color. Then I did a layer of that potato dextrin I mentioned earlier with the crackle stuff, and I bleached out even more color. And then the final layer I did, which would be this brown color here, that's actually rust. So yes, you can dye fabric with rust if you'd like. All you have to do is soak the fabric in a salt and vinegar solution. You get some metal that's rusty. I had a rusty rebar. I wrapped my fabric around that rebar and let it sit for 24 hours, I think, and then it was permanently dyed with the rust. So that's fun. There's like 4 layers of just work on this one piece of fabric. Had a lot of fun with it, but unfortunately these really nice layers of fabric that I put so much work into just don't work right together at all. I unfortunately ran out of time. This was the final project, so I had a whole bunch of other crap to do around this time. I just didn't have the time to make this work. And to be quite honest, I don't think it ever would have worked to begin with. I don't know, maybe it could have if I had more time to plan it out and think about what I actually wanted instead of being rushed the entire time. So yeah, I think of all the projects, this one might be the biggest failure. Even bigger failure than that digital print we looked at earlier. Mainly because this one isn't even finished. But yeah, that's it for fabric dyeing. We're gonna move on to my advanced fabric stuff. We're gonna get some interesting stuff, some garbage stuff, and some really nice stuff. Really nice. A lot of stuff in my advanced fabric classes I'm very proud of. Let's move on. Well, looks like this will have to be a 2-parter. I was hoping it would just be one, but nah, that ain't gonna happen. Nope. So in the next part for fabric art, we're gonna go over all the stuff I did in advanced fabric. Hopefully you enjoyed all the stuff we went over in intro. Some of it was good, most of it was bad. Now for the advanced fabric art stuff, there's gonna be some pretty cool stuff in there. Some sweet little jellies, like we're seeing right now. Woo! Look at that jelly. Adorable. So we're gonna see some nice stuff. And maybe a few bad things. We'll see. So hopefully you liked this video. Hopefully there was some interesting stuff in there for you. Like, comment, and subscribe. Or don't. Probably shouldn't. I'll see you in the next part. Toodles.